Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Ideas Exchange podcast presented by InXpress. I'm your host, Paul Castleberry. This podcast, we're trying to hit all aspects of business, whether it's being an entrepreneur, franchising, marketing, tech, just business in general. We're trying to throw it all here on this podcast. And my guest today, Mr. Steve Chisholm. Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Paul. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you, man. I'm very excited to talk to Steve on this one today because Steve's got a pretty unique perspective to share with us. But before we get there, Steve, you want to give us a little bit about yourself, your background, where you come from, what you're all about?
Sure. So just a real brief background. Been with InXpress for just hit 15 years. So I've been here for a bit. And prior to InXpress, I was with another third-party logistics franchise-based organization for just short of 10 years. So I've been in the industry for a quarter of a century. So it's quite an exciting number. But yeah, I got my degree from the University of Utah in finance and was exposed to this business model when I was working my way through college. And it was in the back of my mind while I was going through after I'd graduated and was working in the finance field and just had this kind of pull to this industry. So jump back in to the logistics world, and yeah, it's exciting.
I think that phrase "eat, breathe, and live logistics" might be an understatement for you because it's just like it's in your blood, it's in your life stream now, right?
Yep, it certainly is.
Well, I say again, Steve's got a unique perspective on the logistics space, not only because of the years you've been in it, but you work on both the corporate side for InXpress and you're also a franchisee for InXpress. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm in a bit of a unique situation where I am working full time at the corporate office to help our franchisees support and develop the best solutions for their customers from a freight standpoint. And then I'm also a franchisee for the past 15 years where I've been able to hire sales reps and a administration team to run the day to day. And I still have that excitement of being able to help grow a business with that focus, of course, being on the customers and the needs that they have getting their freight moved around the country.
Yeah, so you see it from both angles there, and when you and I were talking about this, I thought it was kind of exciting that you've got that unique perspective. So maybe what do you see in the logistics space, specifically with freight, as one of the biggest challenges? Let's start on the customer side, and then maybe we can reverse that and look at it from the franchisee business owner side.
Sure. So from the customer side, first of all, transportation is an imperfect science, right? So there's always disruptions that come up in the marketplace. Just a couple of quick examples. Within the past week or so, one of the major LTL carriers had a cyber attack, so all of their systems went down, and they couldn't operate from an electronic standpoint at all. So they couldn't receive electronic pickups or dispatches. Communications with tracking was down. Really kind of paralyzed their communication system. And so franchisees and customers needed help. And that's where our network comes in. We've got key contacts and ways to get a hold of those key contacts outside of the actual, company communication. We have cell numbers and can get a hold of those that we need to find out how we can keep the business flowing. So there are things that come up. We had another more unique situation happen in the past few months where one of the largest LTL carriers closed their doors. They just couldn't keep operating anymore financially. It was Yellow Freight Systems, and they accounted for about 10% of the overall marketplace. And so not only did that massive amount of customers need to find a home for their shipments, as those shipments found homes on the other carriers' trucks and trailers, you can imagine those thousands and thousands of pickups a day that Yellow was handling. That really compromised the other customers that weren't using Yellow because their shipments were now on trucks that were over, capitalized as far as shipments that were taking up space that maybe they'd used before. So there were massive delays, missed pickups. And so that created quite a disruption within the marketplace as a whole. So again, knowing having the information that we have, we could disseminate that to our franchisees and so on down to their customers, so that the customers knew what options were out there for certain carriers that they may not be familiar with, but had capacity to move the shipments that they had within the shipping lanes, so that they weren't experiencing the massive delays that other shipments were on those carriers that are more heavily impacted in the more capacity flexed lanes on a day-to-day basis. It was very fluid situation where one day a certain carrier might have some capacity, but then within a day or two, they're just overwhelmed. And so it was kind of a moving target. And having the information that we had and the various carrier network that we have access to helped our customers really soften that disruption as much as we could.
Yeah, that was quite the buzz story in the office that day. I remember when that day, and everybody on the freight team was kind of just like, "Oh my goodness, we got to get this done and step up to the plate and help everybody out." So, yeah, very very unique situation. Um, that's just one of many that I'm sure you have seen and you have faced. But maybe you can highlight maybe one more of the biggest struggles that you see in the space for our customers, and I guess from the corporate standpoint, the carriers. I mean, because they're a big player in this too, right? And so, what are some of the struggles they face, and how do you navigate those?
Yeah, and that's really a great question, Paul, because I feel like InXpress is very focused on the customer experience, but we know that without our carrier partners, we don't have a business model. We don't have anybody to pick up and deliver the shipments that our customers have. So we are acutely focused on our customers, or our carrier needs, and those carrier needs can change, right? So we will be in constant contact with them if they have certain lanes where they have extra capacity, where they need to fill up their trailers. They can let us know. We can help get some emphasis from our sales team to get more freight into those lanes. And then the opposite is true as well. Sometimes they'll be so much in excess capacity that they'll have sometimes dozens or hundreds of trailers sitting in certain yards in certain cities because they're so backlogged. And so they need to pull that lever back. So they, again, talking to us and having all the electronic connections that we have with them, we can pull those levers to pull back those options when the carriers need that. So we're very focused on their operational needs because they can change on a daily basis, and so we want to make sure we're listening to and reacting to their needs as well.
Yeah, how do you balance that? Because I know we have so many carrier partners. Uh, Maybe I'm poking the bear here a little bit, but all of them are important. How do you balance to make sure that they're all equal in our supply chain? I guess.
Yeah, and it's a great question because we have access to dozens of LTL carriers, and to the average person, they'll look at a truck and say, well, yeah, they do the same thing, right? They pick up pallets and they put it through their network and then they deliver it. But each carrier is unique as far as how many trucks they have in certain cities and where those trucks are going to from each city to another city. So that transportation or that shipping lane and their businesses are developed differently from that standpoint. So whereas one carrier may have a ton of freight between, say, Los Angeles and Salt Lake, another carrier may not do a lot. And so when the shift is needed, we can let the customers know. We can make the changes that we need to, so that those shipments go to the carriers that have the capacity to want that freight. So it is very much a balancing act. And again, it's an imperfect science. We do the best we can to make sure our customers' needs are met while supplying the carriers with what they're really looking for. And so it is a tightrope that we walk to try and make sure that both sides of the equation are happy and are getting what they need. Because without that, if you have too much of an imbalance, then market corrections need to happen, and then that creates a lot of pain. So the more we can kind of keep that in the middle and keep both sides fairly happy, then that creates more of a stable marketplace.
I'm just now piecing this together, but maybe is this partly where the term "stay in your lane" comes from? Maybe a little
Yes,
bit.
sir.
I mean, from what I've learned so far in my time being here, each one of those carriers, like you said, they've got that specific lane, right? So maybe one carrier is very specific to the Northeast or the Northwest, and that's what you're talking about as far as like them being unique. Um, how do you piece together all of that in all of our vast network of things going on that this particular shipment needs to go with that particular carrier for that particular lane. I mean, is that pretty hard to navigate, or is that something that you've gotten down to, like you said, an imperfect science?
Yeah, again, great question. And it really comes down to the customer, right? What does the customer need? And that's where the franchisee will ask a lot of questions to make sure that they've got a good understanding of what the need of the customer is. Because, of course, price is always going to be part of the conversation. But oftentimes, that service need, whether it's a certain transit time or the quality of the carrier to make sure that the freight is less susceptible to some sort of damage or loss. But all of those go into the equation and the conversation. And then if the franchisee has questions, they get with our team at the support center. We can help them make sure they've got the right carrier as far as carrier rating, what their damage and claims ratios are, what their current capacities are within those lanes. So if they need that direct feedback, we can certainly help with them. But our TMS does a good job, and TMS is a transportation management system. So the customers can go in and put their information in, and it kind of works like a Travelocity or hotels.com website where they'll get rates back with different transit times. But again, they don't necessarily know, is this a good lane or a bad lane for this carrier? Is this a quality carrier or not? So that's where our franchisees, and we support our franchisees with those questions and answers so they know they're getting the right type of carrier for the shipment that's moving in that particular shipping lane.
Awesome. For the listeners, we had your boss, Mr. Andrew Dawson, on a previous episode, and we were talking about just the state of freight and where it's at today and where it's going. And he shared with us that technology is going to kind of be the game changer in the next couple of years. And freight lanes, there's not a whole lot of them opening up. But from your perspective, I mean, would you agree with that? Is there something else you think is coming down the line in the future as far as freight is concerned and how the landscape is changing? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would definitely agree with Andrew in the different periodicals that are out there and the meetings that we either attend in person or get recaps from. Technology is at the forefront of the discussion. For many years, freight companies were kind of behind the curve as far as technology, so they've really been investing in getting the technology back up. And that's like another thing that we haven't even touched on is the amount of investment that the carriers have done at the local terminal level to make sure that the shipments that are being tendered to them are accurate from what the shipper is saying as far as class and weight. And so they've invested so much at the local terminal level to be able to weigh and inspect every shipment, because they found once they started to invest how much of a delta there was between what the customer was stating on the paperwork and what was actually being shipped. And so this technology is making the carriers more acutely aware of what's going on their truck so they can bill that out properly. But then just going forward, as far as how the technology will help the carriers operate more efficiently. And so hopefully drive down the costs for the end user, for the customers, so that they can efficiently manage their operations and their supply chain. But yes, wholeheartedly agree with Andrew, and that technology is really going to be at the forefront for the near and midterm future on as far as transportation goes.
It's crazy to think that we're in 2023 and we're just now kind of having that conversation of technology, because it's freight seems to have been the backbone for many decades, right? And we're just now catching up, so it's pretty unique. Well, Steve, we're coming up to the end of our time here, but I always like to kind of just leave it as an open mic to you to share any kind of last thoughts when it comes to freight and the industry as a whole. Yeah, what do you want to wrap us up with there?
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, as we touched on in the beginning, I mean, for me, transportation's in my blood, and it isn't going anywhere, right? That's why I've loved being in this industry. There's phenomenal people that I get to work with within InXpress and within the different carriers and customers. But it's always going to be a piece of the puzzle. And I think the pandemic really brought the supply chain to the forefront. And so people are more aware of that now, how much the cost of all the goods that we have, it's in the low teens as far as a percentage of what everything goes into comes from transportation. So it is a critical piece of the economy. Love having the opportunity to try and have an impact in a positive way for InXpress and our customers, and just excited to see what the future holds for InXpress as we continue to lead the charge to make the shipping world a better place.
Well said, sir. One last random question. Being in the freight space, what is one of the craziest shipments you've ever seen or had a hand in your time?
So that's a really good question. So probably the more interesting ones are ones where we, from a third party position, we don't really get involved with. So like I've had questions over the years, like moving a loved one's deceased remains from country to country, like so from another country back to the U.S. But one of the more unique ones was we had the opportunity to move a live shark. So that was pretty unique. Moved it from Las Vegas up to Utah, and just the requirements that were required by the carrier and the Department of Transportation to make sure that everything's on the up and up, and there's gonna be no bad things happen when you move a live shark in a tank. So that was one for the record books for us.
Well, help me sleep easy tonight. Did the shark make it alive?
Yes, baby shark made it just fine.
Awesome. Well, Steve, thank you so much. I appreciate your time and sharing your knowledge with us, and keep up the great work, sir. And yeah, we just really appreciate you coming on the show.
You bet. Thanks so much, Paul.
Take care.
I'll see you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Ideas Exchange podcast presented by InXpress. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to show us some love and support, please share it out with others on social media or leave us a rating and review. If you want to know more about what InXpress is, visit InXpress.com to find out what they do and how they can help you and your business. That's InXpress.com. Thank you so much, and we will catch you in the next episode.